I'd been coming to the same cafe every Thursday for months, mostly because it was halfway between campus and the bus stop, and partly because it was quiet enough to think. Or at least pretend I was thinking. That morning, the rain had already stopped, leaving streaks down the window like faint reminders of something that just happened. I was staring at them when she walked in. Mrs. Langford. My friend Ethan's mom. She didn't look like someone who should remember me, but she did. She tilted her head when she caught my eye, smiling in that half-surprised, half-knowing way people do when they're deciding whether to say hello. Ben, she said, her voice soft but amused. You're still drinking the same thing, caramel latte, no whip? I blinked. You remember that? She shrugged, setting down her umbrella. You ordered it at Ethan's birthday, didn't you? You were nervous about spilling it on the carpet. I laughed under my breath, feeling that strange warmth in my chest that comes from being remembered. Yeah. That was, years ago. Not that many, she said, her smile lingering. The cafe wasn't busy, just the hiss of the espresso machine and the soft scrape of chairs. She ordered tea, Earl Grey, and instead of leaving, she sat at the table beside mine. Close enough that I could smell the faint citrus of her perfume. We didn't talk much at first. Just the quiet comfort of being near someone familiar but not expected. I folded the corner of my napkin over and over, trying not to look like I was watching her stir her tea. So, she said eventually, eyes flicking up from her cup, how's Ethan? I haven't heard from him much lately. I hesitated. Busy, I guess. He's always somewhere else lately. She nodded, like she already knew that answer. And you? Are you busy, or just pretending to be? That made me smile. Mostly pretending. Her laugh was soft and low, like it had been waiting for someone to earn it. There was something different about her than I remembered, less polished, maybe. Her hair was pulled back loosely, a few strands escaping around her face. Her hands looked tired, but gentle. I wanted to say something about that, but didn't. Instead, I asked, do you come here often, immediately regretting how cliché it sounded. Only when I can't stand my own kitchen, she said. The silence there feels too loud lately. I nodded. Yeah. I know what you mean. We both went quiet again. Outside, the rain had started up, just a drizzle this time. She looked at me for a moment longer than she needed to. You look nervous, she said softly, teasing but kind. Don't be. It's just tea and bad weather. I looked down at my folded napkin. Guess I'm out of practice. She smiled at that, leaning back in her chair. Practice for what? I didn't answer right away. There wasn't a good one. A silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable, just unfinished. The kind that makes you aware of every breath, every sound outside. The barista clinked a mug. Someone's phone buzzed. Then hers did. She glanced down, frowned, and sighed quietly. Sorry, she said, sliding it into her bag without reading. Not important. When she stood to leave, she placed her hand lightly on my shoulder, barely there, just enough to make my pulse jump. Same time next week, she said. I looked up, surprised. You mean here? Unless you know somewhere quieter, she said, that teasing tone again. And then she was gone, leaving her half-finished tea, a damp umbrella leaning against the chair, and a warmth in the air that felt too deliberate to be accidental. I sat there for a long time after, watching the rain blur the street. My phone buzzed once. Unknown number, don't forget your umbrella next time, nervous boy. I stared at it, heart skipping. Then I noticed, her umbrella was still by the chair. She showed up the next Thursday like she'd promised, even though I half believed she wouldn't. Same seat. Same tea. Same smile that hovered between warmth and mischief. You remembered, I said as she sat down. Of course. I left my umbrella here, didn't I? She hadn't asked for it back in her text, but I'd kept it in my car all week. I slid it across the table now. It's been in the passenger seat. Felt weirdly empty without it. Her eyes softened. That's a strange thing to miss. I know, I said. Guess I miss odd things lately. She didn't laugh. Just nodded, like she understood more than she let on. The conversation drifted in that unhurried way people talk when they're not sure if they should be talking at all. I told her I'd dropped out of my last semester for a break. She told me she'd been separated for nearly 2 years, though no one knew except Ethan and her sister. I didn't want people asking, she said, staring into her tea. Everyone wants a story. They don't really want the truth. What is the truth? I asked. That it's quiet, she said simply. Too quiet, sometimes. I didn't know what to say to that. So I folded my napkin again, tracing its edge. You always do that, she said suddenly. Do what? Fold things. Like you're keeping your hands busy so your thoughts don't show. I froze mid-fold. Does it work? She smiled. Not even a little. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air inside the cafe still felt humid, heavy. She had taken off her sweater, revealing a plain white shirt beneath, sleeves rolled up. A single thin gold bracelet slid down her wrist when she reached for her cup. I couldn't stop watching it move. You're staring, she said without looking up. Sorry. Don't be, she said quietly. For a moment, neither of us moved. The hum of the fridge behind the counter filled the air. My coffee had gone cold, but I couldn't bring myself to take another sip. Then she reached across the table and straightened the napkin I'd been mangling. Her hand brushed mine, just a second of contact, skin against skin, light but unmistakable. See, she said softly. You don't have to fix everything. Her touch lingered in my mind long after she pulled back. I wanted to ask why she came here, why she kept sitting across from me when she must have known what it looked like. What it felt like. Instead, I said, you're nothing like I remembered. She tilted her head. And how's that? You laugh easier now. But you look lonelier. That made her pause. Then she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That's because I am. We sat in silence after that. The kind that felt too full, like words were pressing against it from all sides. When she finally stood to leave, she placed her teacup back down, her fingers brushing the rim once, as if deciding whether to take something with her. Same time next week? I asked before I could stop myself. She hesitated, then looked at me with that same teasing calm. We'll see, she said. Try not to miss another umbrella. And as she walked away, she reached out, almost casually, and tugged at my sleeve, just enough to leave a crease where her fingers had been. A gesture so small it could mean nothing. But I knew better. I didn't see her the next Thursday. Or the one after that. The cafe felt smaller without her there. I still sat in the same corner, ordered the same thing, folded the same napkin, but it all felt like pretending. The chair across from me stayed empty, umbrella stand still leaning against the wall, unused. Then, one afternoon, she walked in, different time, different light, same effect. Thought you quit Thursdays, I said, pretending not to sound relieved. She smiled faintly. I started coming on Tuesdays. Less predictable. There was something careful about the way she moved this time. No playful tone. Her eyes lingered on me, then darted to the window. You okay? I asked. She nodded, too quickly. Just tired. It's been complicated. I didn't ask. I could feel the wall between her sentences. We sat in silence for a while. The air hummed with low music, an acoustic song that seemed to drag its feet. Her hand rested on the table, fingers tapping once, then still. I shouldn't be here, she said quietly, after a while. Why? Because you're my son's friend, Ben. The words came out like a confession, too soft to hold anger, too honest to ignore. I stared down at my cup. You think I don't know that? She gave a small, bitter laugh. You shouldn't have to. Her voice trembled just once, then steadied. She took a sip of her tea, hands shaking slightly, the spoon clinking against porcelain. And then, like the universe was mocking the moment, the cafe door opened. Mom. Ethan. He froze in the doorway, eyes darting between us. My chest tightened. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Mrs. Langford's face softened instantly, years of maternal instinct snapping back into place. Ethan, she said, voice calm, practiced. What are you doing here? Getting coffee before work, he said slowly. His eyes narrowed, flicking toward me. Didn't know you too, we just ran into each other, she interrupted, too fast. He nodded, unconvinced, then turned toward her. The air between us shrank to nothing. I could feel her staring down at her tea, eyes unblinking. When Ethan finally left, coffee in hand, a quick, see you later, neither of us spoke for a long time. She exhaled shakily. That can't happen again. I know. But I didn't mean it. And I don't think she did either. She reached for her bag, then paused, hand hovering near mine on the table. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of her skin. Ben, she said softly, like she was testing the weight of my name. I looked up. Our eyes caught. The kind of moment that bends time. Her breath hitched. Mine followed. If she moved even an inch closer, it would all change, everything we were pretending not to think about. But she didn't. Neither did I. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the tile. I should go. Yeah, I said, barely a whisper. She hesitated, then reached out, fingers brushing the back of my hand, fleeting, electric. You make it too easy to forget where the lines are. And just like that, she was gone again. The napkin I'd been folding was still between my fingers, creased, frayed, almost torn through. It was early evening when she called. Not a text this time. Her voice was quieter than usual, steadier too, like she'd rehearsed being fine. Can you meet me? Just for a bit, she said. By the park near the library. I almost said no. But the way she said just for a bit sounded like a lie meant to protect both of us. When I got there, the sky was already dimming, that soft blue hour that makes everything look more fragile. She was sitting on a bench near the pond, coat tucked around her, a thermos beside her feet. You brought tea again, I said, sitting down at the opposite end. She smiled faintly. Old habits. For a while, we just listened to the ducks and the distant hum of traffic. The air smelled like wet leaves. Then she said, Ethan saw you the other day. I know. He asked about it yesterday, she continued, still watching the pond. I said we were just catching up. That you've been, helping me with something. I nodded slowly. Helping with what? She finally turned toward me. I didn't say. Her eyes were tired, but they didn't look away. There was something raw in them, some quiet tug between apology and need. Ben, she said, voice barely above a whisper, what are we doing? I swallowed. Talking. That's not what this is. She said it like she wanted me to argue, to give her a reason to stay. But I didn't know how. A breeze picked up, scattering dry leaves across the path. She pulled her coat tighter, eyes glistening just enough to catch the fading light. I keep thinking, she said, if I met you first, without the history, without Ethan, would it feel different? Would it still feel wrong? I didn't answer. My throat was tight. I tell myself it's just conversation, she went on, just company. But then I see you waiting here, or remembering my tea, or folding your napkin like you're trying not to think about me, and she stopped. I looked at her. You what? She shook her head. I don't know how to say it without making it worse. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it pressed in, filled with everything we hadn't said. A couple walked by, talking softly, and I envied how simple their closeness looked. Finally, I said, you don't have to make it worse. Just honest. Her jaw tightened. Honest is dangerous. So is pretending. She looked down at her hands. You make it sound easy. It isn't. The distance between us on the bench suddenly felt impossible and small at once. She glanced up, eyes meeting mine, full of all the things we weren't supposed to feel. Then she reached for the thermos, unscrewed the cap, poured tea into the lid. Her hand trembled as she passed it to me. Here, she said. You'll catch cold. Her fingers brushed mine, long enough for both of us to feel it, short enough to deny it. Mrs. Langford, I started, but she cut me off with a look. Don't, she said softly. Not tonight. For a moment, we just breathed, side by side. The pond shimmered with the last streaks of light. And before I could stop myself, I whispered, if I asked you to stay, would you? She didn't answer. Just turned toward me, eyes wet, lips parted, then shook her head slightly, like waking from a dream. Don't ask me that, she said. Please. The tea between us steamed quietly, untouched. She stopped coming to the cafe. No text. No call. No umbrella forgotten behind this time. Just absence, the kind that hums louder the more you try to ignore it. For the first few days, I told myself she needed space. Then, after a week, I started to wonder if I'd said something wrong at the park. Maybe that question, if I asked you to stay, had pushed too far, broken something fragile we'd both been pretending was fine. I still came on Thursdays, though. Still ordered the same coffee. Still caught myself looking at the door whenever it opened. It was the third Thursday when she finally appeared. Not at the cafe, but at the grocery store near my apartment. She almost didn't see me. Mrs. Langford, I said, voice unsteady. She turned, startled. Then her expression softened, then shifted again, guarded. Ben, she said. Hi. She looked different. Distant. Dressed nicely, makeup done, like she was heading somewhere else. I've been meaning to text you, she said quickly, before I could ask. Things have been complicated. I nodded. Yeah. I figured. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. A small pause. Ethan's been staying with me more lately. He's had questions. I felt the air tighten. About us? She didn't answer directly. About me. We stood there in the narrow aisle between rows of cereal and soup cans, surrounded by the small noises of carts and low music. She glanced around, as if suddenly aware how strange this looked. Ben, she said quietly, whatever this has been, it's not fair to you. The words landed harder than I expected. You think that's what I want? Fairness? She gave a faint, almost broken laugh. You think I don't? A silence stretched between us. I wanted to say I missed her, that I hadn't stopped thinking about that night at the park, the steam between us, the way her voice trembled when she said don't ask me that. But I couldn't. Not there. She shifted her weight, hand brushing the handle of her cart. There's someone I've been seeing again, she said finally. Just trying to figure things out. Oh, I said. My voice came out too flat, too fast. It's not serious, she added, like it might soften the hit. But it could be. Right. Her eyes flicked to mine, apology written everywhere. You should stop waiting, Ben. I forced a smile. I wasn't waiting. She nodded once, quietly, and walked away. I stood there, staring at the shelf of cereal boxes long after she was gone. The air smelled faintly of detergent and cold air from the open freezer nearby. I realized my hands were clenched around my phone. That night, I typed out a message. I don't know what we were, but it never felt wrong. I stared at it for a long time. Then deleted it. Typed again. I miss Thursdays. Deleted that too. In the end, I left the phone face down on the table. The next morning, I passed the cafe on my way to class. Her umbrella was still gone. So was she. Top of form, it was late when I finally saw her again, weeks after the grocery store. The street was half empty, a drizzle hanging in the air. I just left a friend's apartment when I spotted her car parked outside the cafe. The lights were off inside, closed for the night, but she was there, sitting behind the wheel, engine idling, headlights dimmed. I hesitated, hands buried in my pockets. I almost kept walking. But she looked up, saw me, and rolled down the window. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." For a second, neither of us moved. The sound of rain tapping against the roof filled the space between words. "Get in," she said finally. The inside of the car was warm, faintly smelling of chamomile and rain. She was wearing that same coat from the park, hair tied loosely. There were faint circles under her eyes, and she looked calm. The kind of calm that comes after too many sleepless nights. "I wasn't expecting to see you," I said quietly. "I wasn't expecting to wait." Her voice cracked a little at the end. She looked down at her hands on the steering wheel. "I thought ending it would make things simpler. It didn't." I swallowed. "You seeing him again?" She shook her head. "No. I tried. But it felt like pretending." I stared at the dashboard light reflecting off her wrist, that same gold bracelet she always wore. I remembered the way it moved when she stirred her tea. The sound of her laugh that first day. The silence that followed every time she left. "I don't know what this is," I said finally. "But I can't just keep waiting for you to disappear." She turned toward me, eyes shining. "I never meant to make you wait." "But you did," I said. My voice was low, but steady. "You made me hope for something you're not sure you want." Her breath caught. Then, quietly, "You think I don't want it?" "I think you're scared to." She closed her eyes, leaned back against the seat. For a long time, neither of us said anything. The rain grew heavier, streaking the windshield in slow lines. "I am scared," she whispered. "Of what it means. Of what it says about me. About you." I looked at her profile in the dim light, how her expression softened and hardened in turns, like she was holding back years of unspoken things. Then, almost without thinking, I reached over and turned off the engine. The car fell into silence except for the rain. "I don't want perfect," I said. "I just want honest." She opened her eyes, meeting mine. "Honest is messy, Ben." "I know." For a moment, we just looked at each other, two people suspended between every bad idea and every honest feeling. Then she reached out, her hand finding mine on the console, fingers hesitating, then settling. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a confession. Just contact, quiet and fragile and real. "I don't know how this ends," she said softly. "Me neither." We sat there until the rain slowed, neither of us letting go. When I finally opened the door to leave, she caught my wrist. "Ben." "Yeah." She smiled, tired, sincere. "Thank you, for waiting anyway." I nodded, unable to say anything back. The door clicked shut behind me. The sound was small. Those small, ordinary gestures had become everything. Ethan knew now. Or maybe he just stopped asking. He'd moved to another city for work, and she told him the truth one evening over dinner, nothing defensive, just steady honesty. It hadn't been easy, but she said afterward that it felt like breathing after holding your breath too long. We never celebrated anniversaries or labeled beginnings. Our story didn't start with a confession, it started with an umbrella. Maybe that was enough. Sometimes we'd walk through the park where she once asked, "What are we doing?" The same bench was still there. Faded wood, initials carved by strangers. She'd sit in her usual spot, pull a thermos from her bag, and pour tea into the lid like before. "This one's yours," she'd say, handing it to me. And I'd take it, fingers brushing hers, the warmth of the cup carrying everything that didn't need words. One evening, as the sun went down, she asked, "Do you ever think about that night? The one by the pond?" "Sometimes," I said. Mostly how I almost said too much. She smiled. "And now? Now I don't have to." We stayed until the park lights flickered on. A quiet breeze rustled the leaves, and she leaned her head on my shoulder. I could feel her breathing slow, steady, content. There was no rush. No fear left in it. Just two people who had finally stopped running from what had already found them. When we got up to leave, she slipped her arm through mine and whispered, almost to herself, "You still fold your napkins when you're nervous." I laughed under my breath. "And you still notice." She looked up at me, same amused, soft gaze she'd given that first morning, and said, "Some habits are worth keeping." We walked home in silence, streetlights glinting off the wet pavement. Her umbrella hung from her hand, unused. At her door, she paused, turned back. "Same time next week?" "Always," I said. And for once, the word didn't feel uncertain. It felt like a promise we'd already been keeping. The rain began again, light, familiar. She smiled at it, then at me. "Tea and bad weather," she murmured. "That's how it started." I nodded. "That's how it stayed."